Okay, this is the olive cruncher. It's a holographic olive cruncher. And probably if you look into the body, you may be able to see the sparkle of the holographic. It's a fly I don't know too much about because it's probably of greater worth to stillwater fishermen. And I'm not a regular stillwater fisherman, but I've had very good reports about this fly. I've tied it up, and it was introduced to me by my friend Norman West, and he gave it a very good name. It can be tied in claret as well as olive, and in fact various other colours. I like the olive because it also works with equal success on rivers as well as still waters. Now I would like to just get the paper there with the details of it. I'm just going to tie the, I use a yellow silk for this, and the hook I use is a Camazan B170. I'm going to tie it in a size 10 because that will, it'll shoot river or still water fishermen. So I'll just start the silk now, which I've already waxed. I'm using yellow because it's an olive fly, but you could use brown or whatever. Okay, the tail. The tail is from an olive cock feather. Usual procedure, we just draw down the amount we think we're going to need, draw it down to get the tips in line like this. When it's there, tear a bit off, line it up. The tail should be about the same length as the body, roughly speaking, about there, and we just tie it down with a sort of a pinch and loop procedure. And that takes, we just go down towards the hook, the bend of the hook, and I'll remove this surplus here, like that. Okay, now that's the tail. Now I'm going to tie in the rib, and I'm going to use a green holographic because this does add a sparkle to the fly. Obviously, if I was tying a claret one, I would use a sort of reddish holographic. But I'm using, well, a claret holographic. But I'm going to use this green. You'll see as this fly develops in the vise here, the characteristics of the cruncher. It has some biots, wing buds for biots for wing buds, I should say, and it's got the characteristic thorax in there. It always has a soft hackle because it would pulsate in the water, and that helps the fly to work. Okay, that's the rib on, and now the body. The body I use is a stripped peacock quill, like this. Stripped it, and I run a permanent marker pen down it in an attempt to dye it. Works very well, and I tie these in by the wide end, which is not the proper way of doing things, because on most flies you tie in by the narrow end, but I like to tie peacock herl mostly in by the wide end because the markings on it are a bit better on the wide end, so they will show up because this part of the fly will be visible. So this is why I do that. That's intentional. And I'll take it up to what I call the thorax area. Now I'm stopping the silk there until I wind this, but while I wind it I'll just park it up the front, and I normally give 3 turns, 1, 2, 3. That's just temporary while I wind this body. And I do this in sort of touching turns, and I'm sure you will see that this makes a very nice body, a natural looking body on a fly. It's because of the way the quill is marked by nature. It gives a sort of segmented rib effect. But we are going to rib it with a holographic, which gives a bit of sparkle to it. Okay, I'm there, so I'm just going to get my silk back to the area where I'm going to tie this off. So I just nip it there, hold it, a couple of winds to secure it, and remove the waste. So that's the body on. Now you can varnish the body if you wish, but I don't think it's necessary. I don't want to varnish it today because I'll have to wait for the varnish to dry before I go any further. I'm going to rib it now, and I'm using this fine holographic as a rib, and I space them out a bit because it shows the underbody with the nice markings and also gives the additional flash of the rib. I'm there, so I'm going to secure that, remove the surplus, keep that bit for another fly, and I just make sure that's secure. Okay, pardon me. Now that's on, I'm going to tie in the wing buds. And the wing buds are biots. They're from the trailing edge of a large goose or swan feather, and they've been dyed. So these go in just like this. One there and one this side. Make that one a little bit. Okay, now then, let me just snip out the surplus bits here. One bit there. These would get lost in the tying down if you wanted to do that. Okay, those are the biots ready to form the wing buds a bit later on. Now I'm going to put in the thorax. And for the thorax I use 3 strands of peacock curl, ordinary peacock curl. And as you know, the peacock curl is always a bit brittle at the tips, so I cut the tips off, and as it's only forming a thorax, I've got plenty of the herl here. I tie it in like that, I draw it back a little bit, and I tie this down. Okay, now you can see the flew. We call this furry bit the flew, and as I wind it I draw it towards me, which brings up the flew, and I'm just going to form the thorax like this. Move my silk a little bit further forward. This forms the thorax. I'm going to build up a bit of bulk, but you've got to be careful, because if you put too much bulk you start to flatten down the under parts. So that's about it really. When I say flatten down, you flatten down the bits you put on the underwinds of the thorax. So that's that. Now the wing buds. Bring it forward like this. Tie that one down. I'll nip off the end. And I do the same on my side. They're secure. Okay, now it's important, the hackle is an important part of this fly, so you can use any soft hen hackle. It's got to be soft because this pulsates in the water. And I think because it pulsates, fish take it confidently. And for some reason, they're usually hooked in the scissors. I don't quite know why, but I think it imitates a nymph, so a slow retrieve is best. Right, and the slow retrieve gives a sort of pulsating action to this hackle, a pulsating movement to the fly. Now, I'm going to use a dyed olive partridge hackle. It's oh dear, it's not a partridge. What is it? It's a French partridge. I knew it was a partridge. It's a French partridge hackle. So I'm going to tie this in by the tip, like this, and I draw down these to form a sort of a little waist there. Can you see what I've done there? And I tie this in across this waist, fairly secure. Now you could bend that back and tie it down, but I'm pretty sure because my silk is well waxed, that should be okay. Right, now I'm going to tie it, and because it's a soft and a longish sort of hackle, it you don't need many winds of this hackle. When it's being fished, it folds back over the fly in a sort of a teardrop shape, and it does give, I'm sure it imitates a nymph, and it does give a lovely, lively appearance to it, appearance of life in the fly. Okay, now I'm going to tie these down like this and make it secure when I remove the surplus. It's important you don't use many winds, 2, maybe 3 at the most, because it's a sort of spider fashion nymph imitating fly. Okay, I'm securing the head now. Can you see the type of thing I mean? It pulsates. It's a soft hackle. These partridge hackles are very soft, but as I say, you can use a soft hen hackle. I wouldn't recommend a cock hackle. Okay, that's it. So I'm now going to put on the whip finish. This to me is a fairly new fly. I'm familiar with all the older patterns, but it's got such a good reputation, recently developed, and we've got to sort of move with the times a bit. So I'm trying to do that, and I have found it very good. Okay, that's I'll just cut the silk as normal, and I'll apply some varnish, and the fly is finished. It's got very good movement in the water. Slow retrieve is best. In the river or on still waters, reservoirs or lakes, or as we have in Wales, clins as we call them. I'm clearing the eye with an old feather. And that is the holographic olive cruncher. You can do it in claret. You see the claret in the body, and obviously you'd use claret materials to tie it. Okay, thank you for watching that. I can recommend the fly, and I hope you have some success with it.